hey, I don't want to be a professional speaker. I have no plans to do that. I just want to buy a rental property. All right. How does this ever affect me?
This is really good for anyone who wants to build a personal brand. If they want to build something where they're getting other investors on board, maybe they're doing some bigger deals, multi-family, all sorts of bigger funds or whatever, and they want to build something like that, this skill 1000% applies. I'm a transformational coach. I'm a world-class speaker. I care about people getting results.
Yeah.
And if they fail, then I'm failing.
Like, you can literally shift your beliefs. Like, how would you recommend somebody do that? If they feel like, oh yeah, I've been telling myself the wrong story for too long. What do I do?
I can actually shift how I think, and how I think affects how I feel, and how I feel affects how I act, and then how I act affects my results. And my entire multi-million-dollar business is built on one sentence.
What's going on, everyone? It's Brandon Turner, host of the Better Life podcast with Brandon Turner and normally Cameron Cathcart, but Cam is not here today because he's off at his celebration of his dad's, not retirement, but like 30 years of service at his church. So it's just me here today interviewing actually a great dude, a really good friend of mine, a guy named Colin Boyd. So Colin, you may recognize him if you're in the Better Life tribe, because Colin came and did a presentation a few months back to the tribe and was teaching people how to talk and how to speak publicly better, how to sell yourself, sell your products, sell your investments, whatever you're trying to do. But I loved his presentation so much. I asked him to come out here to Hawaii, sit down with me, and we spent an hour and a half going through a ton of different stuff. He's just a super funny guy. Today we cover everything from like limiting beliefs and some of the beliefs that you hold, as well as identity, which is super powerful. If you want to change anything in your life, focus on these two things. We talk about some of the habits that he does in his life. Specifically, I want you to listen for the habits that he has done alongside his wife so that they grow together versus growing apart. Super powerful stuff. He talks a lot about storytelling and some of the ways that you can tell stories and how to be better at storytelling. And again, that applies to everybody listening. Even if you're a one-on-one conversation with somebody, being able to get somebody to invest in your deal or to partner with you, that was super powerful. I absolutely loved his talk on charisma. You're going to hear about that later. His definition of charisma is something I've never heard before, but it is phenomenal, and it's going to change the way that I think you approach yourself and how you portray yourself to the world. That'll make more sense when you hear his definition. Listen for that. And we'll talk a little bit about his male modeling later in the show. So that and a lot more on this episode today with Colin Boyd. So without further ado, I'm going to jump right into the interview with my good friend and an amazing communicator, Mr. Colin Boyd. This episode is brought to you by our friends at TurboTenant and Ballpoint Marketing. These two companies are big supporters of the show, and they know how to work with real estate investors and help real estate investors grow their businesses. So be sure to stay tuned to hear how you can get discounts and free stuff from them both. And as you probably know, all the profits from the show go to charities of the guest choosing. So when you listen to the sponsors on the show and you work with these hand-chosen by me sponsors, you're actually doing good for the world. Now let's get to the show. Colin Boyd, man, welcome to the show.
Dude, it's great to be here.
Dude, I love hanging out with you. I'm excited for this show. I'm excited to dig into your life because I actually don't know a whole lot about your backstory. I know that today you are one of the premier coaches for people learning to sell and to speak on stage, sell on stage, whether it's a digital stage or whatever. I know you're that guy. I've learned a lot from you in that. And I've gotten better at just presenting, whether it's to my real estate deals, to investors, whatever. So I know you as the premier guy. I think you've taught, 20,000 some people, absolutely nuts. I know you've helped the who's who of business and entrepreneurship. You are phenomenal at that. I also know you're a father of two, husband of one. And
it's in the right order.
Yeah, that's good. And I believe I heard you were a former male model, which I did not know about you. We will definitely need to cover that today.
Yeah, that was 20 years ago and 20 pounds lighter.
I want to hear all about that. So that's how I know you. But take us back before all of that. Who was Colin Boyd?
Well, I would say for me, when growing up, I was very kind of not engaged with my life. If I'm really honest, I would say at about 23 years old, I kind of had this wake up moment of realizing that I was living my life disengaged with my own life. And when I think about it, it actually started because I remember I was in school and I went to a Catholic boys' school. So I'm sitting there with my high socks on and my little blue cub hat thing on. And I was actually in religion class. And I remember it was coming down towards me to read a passage from the Bible. And it came to me and I started to read. And as I was reading, I started to stutter. And as I'm stuttering, I literally felt like my whole world started to shrink. I don't know if you've ever experienced that, where you're in front of people, you're speaking,
Oh, yeah.
you're reading, and you're like, I couldn't even read. And I got to the point where I couldn't finish the paragraph that I was reading, and then it kind of just awkwardly went on to the next kid, right? And I was about 14 years old then. But I remember walking out of that experience thinking, what's wrong with me? Like, I can't even read. And I remember coming to the conclusion that I must be an idiot. Thanks, man. Thanks for the compassion.
Yeah.
Your face.
I feel so bad for you, man.
You're like, yeah, that's actually true.
Yeah, I mean, we've all known that for a long time, but
finally you work it out. But I remember like coming to this conclusion of I must be an idiot because I obviously can't read and I can't speak. Now, as I grew up from this experience, because it was quite visceral, I remember this experience. I went through my teenage years into my early 20s feeling like I must be stupid. Like there's something wrong with me. I don't know if anyone listening ever felt like that. Just thinking, what's wrong with me? Like two hands.
Yeah. How many hands do I got to put up here?
I was like, what's wrong with me? I must be an idiot. And I remember finding so much evidence to support this belief that I was an idiot.
Ooh, yeah.
And as I went through life, I remember my first job. Out of college, I remember my first job. I was in marketing. And I was so bad at it, like so bad at it. I remember thinking, what is wrong with me? Like I'm obviously not smart enough. And that was when I first discovered coaching, personal development. That was when I first read Rich Dad, Poor Dad, which was got
that here somewhere on my shelf here.
That was transformational for me. I mean, that was my first book that really kind of lit things up for me.
Have you met Kiyosaki yet, by the way?
I haven't.
Oh, no. He's wild.
Dude, what a legend.
Yeah, he's so
a legend. No, he's the OG. He's the OG. And I went through this journey of, oh my gosh, I can actually recreate my beliefs. But if I'm really honest, like the whole process of speaking in front of people, I would avoid that whatever I could. You know, like that 3-minute speech during school or at college. That was like my worst nightmare.
Yeah.
And what's crazy now is that I actually teach that like full time. I've got students all around the world that come to me to learn that. But it started with me being terrible at it, completely petrified. I would have visceral reactions. Like I would stand in front of an audience and share, and my whole hand. Have you ever shaken so much? You're holding the I was holding the microphone. My hand was shaking so much. I had to like grab it like an anaconda, right, with the other hand, and I was wrestling wrestling the microphone, right. And then because I stopped that shaking, and then my leg would start shaking so much.
Yeah.
But what's interesting with that, I remember that experience. I got down, and one of my best mates, I said to him, "Oh, mate, did you see my hand? It was absolutely just shaking like crazy." And he's like, "Oh, I didn't even notice it." And it was so fascinating, all these experiences of realizing how conscious we are of ourselves, especially when we're speaking in front of an audience or reading or anything like that. And so I went on a transformational journey of resolving that within myself and realizing that I can actually shift how I think, and how I think affects how I feel, and how I feel affects how I act, and then how I act affects my results. And so, but I didn't understand that mind, emotion, physicality connection until I started understanding personal development and that sort of stuff. So
yeah, I want to touch on a couple things there. First of all, just a quick side funny story based on what you just said. I was following my buddy Jeff the other day. So Jeff Ahern, who lives here in Maui. I'm following him to church. We're like pulling into church. Just happened to be, we left at the same time. We live in the same neighborhood. I'm following him to church. I get to church, and he parks his car. I park my car, and he goes, "Oh man, do you see that?" He goes, "You see how I almost drove right by the intersection, then forgot my blinker and had to turn quickly in?" I was like, "No, I had no idea. Like I didn't see that at all." He goes, "Oh, I just thought you thought I was just a moron driving." And I was like, "No, you look just fine." He's like, "I've been for the last minute just feeling super embarrassed that I almost missed the turn to church that I've been 100 times." But I remember we just had this conversation then about we just envision that everyone's looking at us, like with you at the microphone. Everyone must be judging me and looking at me and laughing at me and thinking I'm dumb. And in reality, everyone's just, I was consumed with my own life. Like what was going on in here? So
completely.
Yeah.
I mean, we're just, from the facts, we create these meanings because we're meaning making machines. And the challenge is that we're right with all of these fears as human beings. One fear is the fear of not being enough.
Yeah.
Every human has that fear, the fear of not being enough, the fear of being judged, the fear of being found out. We have this core fear. We have another fear of like not belonging, of, and part of this is when you become a leader and you start sharing your story, whether it's be speaking, whether it be building a fund, whether it be investing, it's like you start to show up differently, even for your extended family and things like that. And it's like this fear of like, who do I belong anymore? So it brings up all these fears that comes up whenever you show up. So it's fascinating.
Yeah, that's a great point, man. I also wrote down here, and I love it. You said you found evidence to support your belief. And so what's fascinating is that I can think of 100 things in my life, like examples of that, but the belief may not be correct, but we will still find evidence to support it. Right? Like I use this example all the time, but I used to have no problem talking on the phone. I talk on the phone all the time. But then all of a sudden I started saying, I'm not good at the phone. I'm not good at talking on the phone. And all of a sudden I started finding evidence on why, I'm really not good at talking on the phone. Or I say I'm not good at selling. Or I used to say I'm not good at raising. I remember breaking down, almost crying to a performance coach. And I'm like, I hate raising money. I can't raise money. I'm never going to be good at raising money. I never want to ask another person in my life for money. And then I all this evidence on why that's true. Here, look at this example and this example. And see, I stutter here and I'm not good at talking here. And that was like that pivotal moment in my life where that coach was like, let's shift that belief. Like, is that actually true, or did you make that true? And I've raised $400 million now since then.
You just starting out?
Yeah, just starting out, man. Just getting warmed up.
Just getting warmed up. Just revving the engines. 400 mil.
It's so true. But
I love that.
I hope that's true. But what he's trying to tell me is like, you can rechange, like you can literally shift your beliefs.
Yeah.
If you want to. So how does somebody, like, how would you recommend somebody do that if they feel like, oh yeah, I've been telling myself the wrong story for too long? What do I do?
Well, I think, I think it's Dan Sullivan who says all progress starts with the truth.
Oh, so good.
And I love that, because when it comes down to it, I remember when I was just starting out in my coaching business, I always wanted to do well in my coaching business, but I was really struggling to grow it.
Yeah.
And I remember I got to a point where, I was earning under $100,000 a year. But in my mind, I was like, oh my gosh, I should definitely be being paid more than this.
Yeah.
And I had to come to a point where I realized, no, what I'm actually bringing to the market at that point was less than $100,000 a year. Like the value I'm bringing to the market, I had to be honest with myself and go, this is actually what I'm creating in my life, no matter what I'm telling myself. So this is a little bit different, but it's like I had to face the truth. But from there, then I started to think, well, how would someone who earns $100,000 or more, millions, whatever it is, how would they show up? And I remember deciding that, and what would they believe and tell themselves? And that was when I first started kind of recreating my beliefs. And to be frank, even to this day, I write out my beliefs quite often in my diary. Dear diary, this is my beliefs about Colin.
You're so handsome and smart. What a great set of abs you got.
I write out things like, I'm a transformational coach.
Yeah.
I'm a world-class speaker. When I get on stage, I freaking rock, right? And I started writing these things out. In fact, recently I remember I was really challenged where I didn't feel like this was about 4 years ago. I didn't feel like I was a true leader. And to grow anything, to grow a fund, to grow your properties, to grow a business like mine in the expert space, you have to be a leader.
Yeah.
And I realized that I wasn't a leader. In fact, I remember my youth group leader saying to me one day, Colin, I feel like you're one of those people who, you ride in the pack in like a peloton, right? In bike riding, but you never pull out and sit at the front of the peloton and feel the grit, the mud, the stuff that hits you at the front. And I realized that I was always kind of playing small. And I started writing out. I started going, I am a leader. And I know it's kind of simple, but it was really uncomfortable for me. And I started writing this out physically. And I remember writing, I'm a leader of market leaders. And I started to declare that and started to believe that and write that at every single day. And I remember it was about 3 months later, I got the chance to work with Amy Porterfield, who is just incredible, probably, if not the biggest market leader in my industry. And I've worked with.
She's done like 100 million in sales now, hasn't she?
Dude, she's like that. Incredible.
For a small team, just her and a few, like absolutely nuts what she's done.
Yeah. And so she's like the queen of the digital course space. Yeah. And I remember getting a text from her with a video of her testimony of working with me. And I remember just looking at that and just this feeling of that wouldn't have been created if I didn't decide in that room several months ago that I was a leader of market leaders.
Yeah.
Right. And I say that with respect because, everyone who I coach, they've got their own expertise, but it was like in my space, I'm like, I want to lead the market leaders in my niche, in my expertise. And that decision in certainty started to extrapolate more evidence, and I started to notice it more and more, and then it just showed up more and more. And I've done that many times past that. So
that's beautiful.
I think anyone can change their beliefs, and it starts with a decision of going, this is where I'm at. This is the truth. What would I actually believe about myself? Start writing that down physically. Do it for 30 days straight. And your brain, it's called your reticular activation system, your RAS, starts to notice that. And then you'll notice that more and more. You'll move towards it. You'll start feeling better about it. You start feeling more confident, and then you just start doing it more.
I love that. So I want to get into where you led after that. Before we do, I want to get to this week's show sponsor. So one thing we do on the show, it's a little different, is we send 100% of all the ad revenue we get directly to a charity of the guest choosing. So before I read the ad, which actually the ad this week is going to be related to exactly what you just said, where are we sending the money from this episode?
I love Compassion. I feel like they do
too.
a really good job. We've sponsored kids for years, ever since I've been married for 18 years now.
What does Compassion do for those who don't know? Because I love them too.
Yeah, Compassion really just, find kids that are in challenging, difficult situations in third world countries, and you pay for their education, their food, their birthdays, their Christmases, their all that sort of stuff. But what I love about Compassion is they really engage the sponsors. So they do such a great job of sending, letters and all that sort of stuff to the sponsor. So I feel like they do a fantastic job and have done well for years. So I'd love to send it to them.
Cool, man. We will do that. Compassion is phenomenal group. I have 2 kids right now that we're sponsoring through Compassion. So very cool. We'll do that. All right. So I look down at my phone and I see this text. You need to call me. Your house is on fire. And I sat there and I'm looking at the screen and I'm wondering, is this some kind of a joke? The guy who sent it was a tenant I had been trying to evict for months, and he hadn't paid in forever. He had trashed the house. I mean, it was disgusting. And the guy himself was, pretty darn unstable. Now, of course, I call him after that text and it goes to voicemail. Great. Now, a few minutes later, I get a call from the fire department. Yep, my first ever rental house was burning down. So how did I get myself in that situation? Well, I didn't screen that tenant. I put in someone I thought would be good, and he was until he wasn't. Now, this was over a decade ago, and since then, I've learned how to properly vet a tenant, and that's through Turbo Tenant, which makes screening for both background and credit really, really easy. But it gets even better. Turbo Tenant also helps you market your rentals to dozens of the largest sites, including apartments.com and Redfin. You can create custom leases that cover all your rental laws, and you can even use Turbo Tenant for your automatic rent payments. All of this for less than the cost of your Netflix subscription. Yeah, I know, crazy. Save time, save money, and save your sanity by using Turbo Tenant. And because you're so darn cute, you can use the code Brandon10 to save 10%. So check it out at turbotenant.com/betterlife. Hey, so many of you have heard me tell that story about how I bought my daughter Rosie a fourplex, like a rental property, the week she was born, and how we put it on an 18-year, mortgage payoff plan so it'll be paid off when she graduates from high school. So essentially, my tenants are paying for Rosie's entire college. Now that's pretty awesome, right? Not to mention, it's also making almost like $1,000 a month in cash flow. That's double awesome. But I don't think I've ever shared really exactly how I found that deal. So here it goes. I found it through direct mail marketing. And here's how. I simply built a high quality lead list of a lot of names and addresses of potential sellers, and I sent out a whole bunch of mail to every person on that list. And then I talked on the phone to a ton of people, and then I finally got one person that was interested enough to sell me the property, and I got a deal at a great price. So building that giant lead engine like that, I mean, it works, but it takes a ton of time, knowledge, and effort, which can really slow down an investor's growth, which is why I reached out to my friend Ryan with Ballpoint Marketing. I asked him to sponsor this show because they're the best at doing everything that I just talked about. Like, they're literally going to help you build your entire lead engine. You're going to get a one-on-one call where they're going to help you figure out what you want and then build your lead list for you. Their robots are going to handwrite the postcards with a real pen, which is super cool. They're going to send them out, and they'll even answer the phone calls for you. Plus, they'll help you track it all inside of a CRM that they create for you. I know, it's crazy awesome. And it's going to help you land way more deals consistently. And because you're awesome and because you listen to this show, you're going to get a discount when you tell them that I sent you, or just use code Brandon when checking out with them. I love Ballpoint Marketing and officially recommend them to all my friends and masterminds. So if you're ready to kick your deal flow up a notch, getting more quality leads without pulling your hair out, just go to ballpointmarketing.com/betterlife, or just shoot me a DM on Instagram with the word ballpoint, like one word, ballpoint, and I'll hook you up with them directly. Back to you. So you've been a professional speaker for 15 plus years now. How did you get into that then? Going from, I don't want to talk in front of people, to changing your belief to now you're getting paid to do it. How did that transition go?
Well, I started studying life coaching.
Okay.
And so I was doing a life coaching certification. I'm about 7 months into it. And I'm living in a 2-bedroom apartment on the side of the railway tracks, newly married. Obviously I'm flourishing, right? I'm like killing it. And the problem is I had all these desires of creating a business, growing a life, doing something significant, making great money. But the problem is that I just didn't know how to get clients.
Yeah.
And I had what I call half a client. So a half a client is one of those clients that turns up every other session, pays you every third session, kind of thing, right? It's completely unsustainable. And I got a phone call from a friend, and he said, "Hey, I've got a presentation coming up. Would you like to do it? Because I can't do it." He's like, "It's a free presentation. I can't do it. Would you like to do it?" And I was like, "Sure, that sounds great." Now, I'd never spoken before professionally, right, as a coach or anything like that. And only at college, those 3-minute presentations that I'm shaking at, right? So I'm
shake. You ever seen the shake weights? Like that? It's like the shake weight that like vibrates, gets your arms all strong. Yeah.
Maybe I need to train with those.
Yeah.
For speaking. It's a good speaking train. And so
bring that on stage next time you tell that story.
Yeah. I'm completely freaking out, right? My wife we do the morning walks, and she's just basically my coach, prep talking me, going, "Everything's going to be all right. You're going to survive. Everything, you're going to make it, Colin." I get there that evening. It's literally a dark and stormy night. I'm walking up the stairs with my wife. She's on my arm, but really I'm actually on hers. And the event organizer sees me. He runs over. He's like, "Colin, you wouldn't believe this biggest event we've ever had in our history. We've got 137 people in the room here to hear your speech." This is like the worst news of the night for me. I'm just like,
you're hoping for like 7 people to show up, on their phones the whole time.
We haven't had many people show up. So, just whatever you've got would be great. But it's like the pressure's on, and I go, "Okay, I'll do it." And I get up and I speak. And what I didn't realize at the time was I'd created not only a great speech, but an irresistible offer. And so at the end, I made an offer. It was a free offer, but it was to do some coaching with me. And out of the 137 people, I had 125 of them give me their cards. I put it in like a little fish bowl that I'd got from like the dollar store, 99-cent store at the back. And then 125 people or so gave me their details. I followed up, and then I ended up signing about, it was like 12 to 13 full coaching clients.
Wow.
And then 14 days later, I was standing on the stairs after one of the coaching sessions, and there was a director from Hewlett Packard in the audience. And he called me up and he said, "Loved your presentation. Can you come and speak at the next training day?" And that ended up having 5,500 people in the audience at my first ever paid speaking engagement. And so spoke with HP for 10 years, traveled all around the world with them, worked with big corporations, and then 5 years ago just transitioned to helping other entrepreneurs to build presentations that sell. And then now had the chance to coach like 20,000 clients around the world, done our courses, all that sort of stuff. So, but that's where it started for me. And I realized that in literally one presentation, you can change the trajectory of your life and in your business. And what's cool is one pattern I've noticed is that if you can dial in a presentation, especially in the online space now, you can deliver that same presentation over and over and over again. I know we were just talking about how you've delivered hundreds of webinars.
Yeah, and they're all different.
Are they all different?
Yeah.
Oh,
Yeah.
dude.
Well, I would get my favorites that I repeat them every
Right.
few months, but man, it was a tremendous amount of work. I don't recommend it for anybody.
Yeah.
It's like a pastor trying to do a new sermon every week. That's what it felt like.
Yeah, because what I found is you don't need to do that.
No, you don't. I've learned that lesson now. I'm like, no more. I have one speech now.
Yeah, one speech. It's like once you look at like the best speakers, and you are the best speaker, so you only need one.
I'm the best speaker.
The best speakers have like one or two main talks that they do. And what I've noticed with my best students is they dial in one presentation, they deliver it over and over and over again, refine it, and it just keeps on just converting.
Yeah.
So that's what changed my life.
That's beautiful.
And that's why I got obsessed about speaking.
Yeah, I love that. You know, some people listening to this might be saying like, well, hey, I don't want to be a professional speaker. I have no plans to do that. I just want to buy a rental property, or I just want to build my, dog walking business, whatever. Like, how does this ever affect me? So what is your answer to that?
Well, I would say that this is really good for anyone who wants to build a personal brand online. If they want to build something where they're getting other investors on board, maybe they're doing some bigger deals, multi-family, all sorts of, just bigger funds or whatever, and they want to build something like that, this skill 1000% applies. I think it could apply if you're a professional and you just want to speak in the, in your company. Personally, I usually work with people who are more like entrepreneurial. So they want to do their own thing. They want to start their own fund. They want to start their own, business or whatever it is. And that's kind of the space that I really focus in.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I love it because like majority of the time, like most people, when they're trying to grow their business, they do one-to-one stuff. Like they have a conversation and they hope that that person converts, and it probably won't. So they go to another one. They have another conversation over the course of many months. But like you proved in that first example, you got in front of 100 and some people at one time and boom, it converted. When you can get in front of multiple people at one time, maybe that means you're going to go to a real estate event and go, if you're trying to raise capital, let's say, I go to a real estate event, I get in front of 100 people, 200 people. And by the way, there are real estate clubs. If you're a real estate investor, there's clubs that happen all around the country in every major city. I mean, there's some in Newport where you're at, I'm sure. Every major, even like small city has these real estate clubs. Might have 5 people, might have 500 people. You can go there and you get to know the conference owner, the event organizer, and you're like, hey, I have this thing I can teach. They would love that. All of a sudden, now you're in front of 50, 100, whatever the number is. You could be in front of 5 people. But one, now your status is elevated. Now you're not just some random guy asking for money. You're teaching something. People are, oh, that guy's legit. And if there is a pitch of some kind, even if it's a soft one, it just, for example, like when I'm on stage, I usually will say like, hey, if you want to, give me money, run to the back of the room. Like that would be too forward at an event. Instead, I was just like, so at Open Door Capital, here's what we do. And if you want more information, there's a QR code, right? Now all of a sudden I get their names and I can convert at mass. So the point I'm making here is in almost any business, it is way more fun to convert at mass than it is to do one-to-one.
Yeah, and it's such a trust accelerator.
So much.
Because you're just being on a stage, it has some unconscious assumptions, which is just because you're on a stage, and that could be a virtual stage, it doesn't have to be a physical stage, but it could be a webinar. The fact that you're hosting this webinar has an unconscious assumption in the audience's mind that you know what you're talking about, you're a leader. Now, obviously, you should still know what you're talking about, but it's just an assumption because you're on a stage, you obviously know what you're talking about, you've got enough confidence to talk about this topic. So it's just this trust amplifier that occurs. And then what's cool, I love what you are talking about, which is what I call a soft sell. So a soft sell, there's 3 types of sells. There's a sharp sell, soft sell, no sell. And the soft sell is just hey, if you've resonated with me, you've enjoyed this content, let me share with you what the next steps could look like if you would love some further help implementing this.
Yeah.
We run a thing called Open Door Capital. This is what we do. Talk about it, who it's for, who it's not for. And then there's a little link here. You can book in a 20-minute, property analysis call, and we'll help you go in the right direction.
Yeah.
Like something like that. You do that in front of 50 people, 100 people. You might get maybe 10, 20 people sign up for it. Out of there, you might get 6 or 7 clients. But then you don't have to do really a lot of one-on-one stuff, and then all of a sudden, if you do book a call, it's a lot shorter because that trust is already built. So a lot of the time, people think, that the sell of the offer happens in the sell, like when you're actually making the offer, but it doesn't. It happens before the sale. And so the more work you can do before the sale, like a short webinar, a short presentation. In fact, there's a guy who lives down the street from me. He's one of my students, and and he's just started like a real estate fund investing. He's getting people together, and he's been running webinars. He's already up and running.
Yeah.
And he just talks about the deals, what he's got on the table, why you would, why you wouldn't, and then takes phone calls, and then boom, he's got his fund up and running.
Yeah. I love webinars for raising capital for real estate because, you can get 10, 20, 50, 100 people, whatever. You can pay for it. You can pay ads to like Facebook and Google to drive people to your webinar, and Zoom makes this super easy. There's a lot of software, but let's just say, for example, everyone knows Zoom. So use Zoom. They sign up for the webinar. They get the emails automatically. They show up to this live event, or maybe they watch the replay. And there's a million little hacks you can do to improve your conversions and all that stuff. But, they show up, and then you establish your credibility, and some of them will invest with you. Because like you said, you're on a stage right then. In fact, to go to another industry that some of our listeners are is like being a real estate agent. If I was a real estate agent, I've been asked this question before, like, what should I do as a real estate agent? I'm just getting started. I'm like, first thing I do is I'd study my market really well. And then I just do a webinar that was like how to sell your Newport house above asking. And then I'd advertise that webinar. I'd get a bunch of people on that webinar. The only ones going to attend a webinar on how to sell my Newport house are people who live in Newport that have a house they want to sell. So it's your perfect target. You're on a stage. You're going to screw up everything, and you're going to look like an idiot the first time. That's fine. And you're going to learn. You're going to do it a second time. And then you're going to pick up clients that way. And you're going to do it without having to do 500 one-on-one coffee dates with people. You're going to do 500 coffee dates at one time.
Yeah.
And
what's cool is like once you got the replay, you can actually send that to people when they inquire. So, hey, before we even catch up, I've put together some, the 5 secrets to selling your real estate above asking in Newport Beach. And it's like, boom, watch this. It's 30 minutes, and then you're positioned as an expert right away before you even get to the conversation. I love that. In fact, I've always thought that I've never seen this done yet, but I'd love to see somebody should try it who's listening to this. Come on.
Is get a billboard. Even if you had like a temporary one where you can just pay for like a day, like one of the digital ones, but get a billboard and just put on there like maybe a QR code or maybe just an easy email address or a website like Newport50k.com, right? Or something like that, right? So people see it and it just says like, sell my Newport house for $50,000 above asking. How? Click that link, goes to webinars. So I've never seen billboard to webinar, but I would love to see that if that could convert for a real estate agent. So somebody's got to try that.
I love it.
Yeah, would that be fun?
I haven't done billboards.
Yeah, no, I haven't either. Nobody has, but I love thinking billboard.
Let's do it.
Yeah, either billboard, or I've also thought about going to Vegas because everyone in Vegas is like willing to like throw money around. So I've literally thought about doing that for Open Door Capital, is going to Vegas and putting billboards everywhere, like all over the casinos and stuff like that. That says things like the average, the odds of winning in blackjack, 48%. The odds of winning at Open Door Capital, 99.3. Whatever that thing is.
Totally.
Just push that idea that like you can gamble here or you can gamble here, and this one's a lot more sure to make you money.
Dude, well, that'll work.
We'll see. I think it'll work. So you worked with HP for a while. That's cool. Like, what do you remember? Let me go back to before that. What was that speech that you started giving when you were just getting started out? So you didn't have a ton of life experience to be able to be like, here's my 20-year career, and like, how did you get a speaking gig when you didn't have that experience?
I mean, first of all, one of the directors was in the presentation, that first presentation. So they obviously saw that I could present, but I was just talking about human performance. So they were just running a training day. They wanted personal development. So I actually just spoke on the stuff I was learning as a life coach. So around, belief changes, what you focus on is what you get, like performance, excellence, all that sort of stuff. So it was more just general. Performance stuff.
And so you don't have to be necessarily an expert. Like where I'd love to, or I'm kind of going with that is like, I think people oftentimes get intimidated thinking, well, I'm not Brandon Turner with real estate. Like, why am I supposed to get on stage and speak about my real estate? I've only got 5 deals or 10 deals. But those people, there's still things that they can speak on.
Oh, 100%. And I mean, think about it like this as well, is that the audience doesn't know what you're supposed to say.
Yeah.
And so often we have all these ideals of, I should be at this stage or I should be at this level. Just be at the level you're at.
Yeah.
And just start with where you're at. To be frank, run it as an education thing. Like maybe you've bought a few properties and you want to start building something bigger, get investors or whatever it is. Just share that story, share that journey, and don't be someone that you're not, but just share with what you got, and then it will just keep building from there. So you don't have to. One of the wrong beliefs I think that people have is that they think that only the market leaders are on stage because they're market leaders. But the truth is that they're market leaders because at some point they decided that they were going to get on a stage.
Yeah.
Whether it's a
Isn't that fascinating?
Whether it's a podcast stage, whether it's a virtual stage, a live stage, At some point they said, I'm going to get on a stage and be a leader in front of people.
Mm.
And because they did that, then their status elevated in the marketplace. And so people get the cart before the horse. So that's
Yeah. I love you brought up podcasting too. I think people think of stages as like I'm at a real estate event or a conference or whatever, but being a guest on a podcast is a phenomenal stage, right?
Oh, phenomenal. Yeah.
Like you're in front of potentially, I mean, most podcasts have even a small podcast can have thousands of downloads per episode.
Yeah.
And so you can get on those without, I'll say something like I ran one of the biggest podcasts in the world for a long time, Bigger Pockets. It is so incredibly difficult to find good guests. I'm going to say that because most people don't have charisma. They don't know how to tell a story. They don't know the basics. And I'm not talking about having a 4-year degree in storytelling. I'm talking about like taking an hour-long class on storytelling. And you'd probably be better than 99% of the people. And then knowing how to pitch to a podcast, the bar is so incredibly low. Like it's just up, but most people don't know how to do it. And so I just encourage people that if you've done a few deals of real estate or whatever your industry is, you can be real estate. There are podcasts out there. If you can just get a little bit, like learn a little bit from what you're teaching. So maybe I can put it back on you again. What should people know before going on a podcast to go tell their story? Like how can they be a good guest?
I think being a good guest is having a few stories that you can share. So one of the distinctions that I made recently was a difference between what I call a conversion story and an origin story.
Okay.
And so if anyone wants to go on a podcast or do a webinar or whatever, they should try to find a conversion story. And a conversion story is the story that best articulates the transformation that you help people with. And so an origin story is like everything about who you are and where you grew up.
Mm.
And that's kind of nice to know, but it's a little bit boring if it's just general information. Like your mum probably loves that stuff.
Yeah.
But your mum, we all love our mum, but she's not necessarily our target audience. So the story you should share is your conversion story. And so your conversion story is you think about what's the one or two experiences that I've had in my life that best articulates the transformation that I help people with. And if you can find those stories, then that authentically draws your audience towards wanting to work with you.
And you can kind of combine them together, right? Like when we started this podcast, you told me your origin story.
Yeah, the origin story. So I don't normally start with that story about being in class.
Yeah.
But you asked me a little bit different. Like I don't normally get asked that question on a podcast. So I kind of started a little bit further back, but it led towards a conversion story. Yeah,
I can totally see how you did that.
Yeah.
One of the stories I tell oftentimes, and I might even got this from you actually, because it's been more recent since I've known you that I've been telling this story, but I tell a story about when I got into real estate. I remember standing in the driveway between these two ugly little houses that I owned. It was a duplex, two separate houses on one lot. And I stood in the driveway holding like $650 in cash. And my tenant had just walked over and handed me $650. And I remember thinking, well, shoot, my mortgage is only $620. And he just paid me $650 for rent. I'm living in this house. He's living in the other house. I don't have to pay anything to live here. I'm living for free. And I remember just being blown away that fact that I was, 21 years old and I was living for complete free. And that was like the first lesson in that moment. Then right after that, next thought was, well, what if I did this 10 times? Right. And I was like, I could be out of a job. And that was the shift that made me get into real estate, really.
I love that.
Right. So it's a story. It's a true story. I remember standing there, but I'm not just like, so I bought this house in this area. This was the address. This is what it looked like, which, cool. But I'm saying I was transformed in that moment, and that started my journey. Now, it's kind of a idealized version. I left out some of the details. I'm not telling you the house color. I'm not telling you all the drama.
But you could.
I could.
You could.
And do you think I would make it better?
I do. Well, a great story has visual, auditory, kinesthetic in it. So what you saw, what you told yourself, what you heard, and what you felt.
Dog barking next door. It
could be that.
Yeah.
Like it could be that. But it could be, I was standing on this old gritty driveway looking at this red brick 2-bedroom apartment that I owned, and then the gray brick 2-bedroom apartment that I lived in. And I remember my tenant comes out, he's got these blue overalls on, and he comes over, he's got this long beard that I wish I had at the time, and but I do have now. And he handed me $650. I remember looking at it and doing the maths.
Yeah.
So it's like when you tell a story that has more visual, auditory, kinesthetic. Oh, I haven't even got to the auditory kinesthetic yet, because then you can say, and I remember having this conversation with myself of, oh my gosh, he just gave me $650. My rent's $600. I just made $50. I could do this for the rest of my life. But I had this tension within me of, yes, I was excited. I was excited about it, but to be quite frank, I didn't know how to multiply it at the time.
Yeah.
I just knew that I was onto something. Something awoke within me.
Yeah.
And it was at that point I made a decision to go, I want to no longer live my life kind of just doing the 9 to 5. I want to build something that is significant, that gives me freedom, that has meaning. And that started my journey. And then you can kind of go into it. So
that's so good. It reminds me of a great fiction book. It's just really descriptive of the area and like what was happening. And like, it might take a whole paragraph to get like to explain the setting, but then you're in it and you're basically hallucinating while you're reading this book. Cause like you see it all in your mind's eye.
Yeah. So what you saw, what you told yourself and what you felt, that's what you lead with when the story.
Love that,
And then you have to bring in cognitive dissonance. So basically a tension of where you were and where you wanted to go. And so the way people so what happens is a great story is a story that when you tell it, the audience goes, oh, this is like my story.
Yeah.
Right. And the way you do that is you talk about the tension that you felt within you. So you say, this is what I wanted to create, but this is where I was stuck. And because the audience has universal feelings in tension of this is where I want to go, this is where I'm stuck. And if you bring in that emotion, that tension, the audience goes, it's exactly how I feel. And all of a sudden your story becomes their story.
Yeah.
But then what happens is because you've done, $400 billion in real estate.
It's just warming up.
Warming up. Like I said, we're just warming up.
Trillion, by the way. Trillion.
Trillion.
You get the numbers
wrong. But because you've got the credibility now, you're no longer just the kid getting $650. You've got the credibility.
Yeah.
And then now you're the person that can lead them.
Yeah.
Not just the person who's like them. You're the person that can lead them. And then what happens, then you reveal, hey, the next steps is, the thing that I learned was that I needed a property investing system. Right. And that is the path that they can follow. So there's 3 questions you have to answer in any great conversion story, which is, are you like me? The start of the story tells this sense of, I am just like Brandon. I'm just like Colin. I've felt like that before. The second question is, can you lead me? Which is like, have you done something with your life? Have you achieved the thing that I would love to achieve? Right. And then the final question is there a clear path I could follow to get that?
Beautiful,
which is just one, it's usually one sentence and it's a description of that one thing that you did to achieve it. And it's simplified, but it's like a description. So for me, my pathway is that you were just one irresistible presentation away from the breakthrough you want in your business. That's my entire multi-million-dollar business is built on one sentence, that sentence. Your business could be built on, you could also even do that sentence. It could be even an identity. So you could say, stepping into your real estate investor identity is the only way you can truly create the freedom and the life you've always desired. And so it's like an identity that they step into. But we have to have a clear sentence that goes, this is the path we need to follow.
Yeah.
So.
That's beautiful, man. I love it. When I teach in social media to people, I have a couple, I've had some social media masterminds over the years, some kind of high ticket social media stuff. And whenever I'm teaching that, I always say the key to social media growth, at least for me, has been, I'm not telling my story on social media. I'm telling their story through my story. And so I love that you're echoing that same concept of like, yes, you're telling a story on stage, but the point of the story is not so people go, oh yeah, now I know that person, their story. It's all about them. Everyone's just selfish inherently. We're like, we all just care about ourselves and how to improve our life. So the quicker when you can get to that. Now, what were the 3 questions? It was one, like, who am I like you?
Are you like
me?
Yeah.
Yep. And then like, can you lead me?
Yeah.
And then is there a clear path to get there? Oh, that's so good, man.
Yeah. And I would say with your story, I would go, I wonder where was a hard time right before that moment.
Yeah.
So I would go, was there a time when you were sitting on the couch, just feeling like you wanted to create this life, but you didn't know how? It was like right before that first property that you bought, because what I've discovered is that if you can tell the story that goes right before the first time you experience the breakthrough, because that's where your audience usually is. Usually, it depends on the audience. So that story is great. But your story might be great for beginners, people who are kind of really new to real estate.
Yeah.
But if you're speaking at like a high level mastermind, you might tell a conversion story where the first time you bought a really big multifamily complex or something like that, or the first time you did a fundraise or something like that. And so, but you would tell the story, it's right before that, it's the tension before it, and then initiating it, and then the transformation that happened, if that's what they want to do.
That's cool.
So you got to also find the right context for the story as well. So, but
yeah, I'm reading the book right now. I think it's actually called How to Tell a Story from the Moth. I don't know the people that do the Moth, right? So it's called How to Tell a Story. I just picked it up on Amazon recently. It's a good book, but one thing that stood out to me is they talk about the tension thing you're talking about here. Right. And they talk about how powerful it is to have a decision. And I bring this up because I interviewed on one of the previous episodes, Jeff and Megan Ahern. They were on this podcast. Yeah. And Jeff is telling the story when he jumped out of an airplane. And now Jeff's not he'd never done storytelling training or anything. He's just telling a story, right? And he gets to this point where he's like, yeah, I jumped out of the plane. I've done it hundreds of times before because he's in the military. And he's like, all of a sudden something went wrong and it whipped me around and I'm tumbling, I'm wrapped in my cable, I'm free falling. He's like, and then I look over and I see everyone else is deployed, looking up, and they'd already deployed their chute, which means that we're below 500 feet. And he's like, all of a sudden he's like, I had to make a decision. If I pull my my reserve chute, it might not slow me down enough in time, I'm going to die. But if I take the time instead to untangle my current chute, I might not get it untangled and I'll die. And I had to make that choice. And he's like, this built up this tension there. I'm like, oh, this is such good storytelling. This tension of like, I didn't know what to do, right? Now, I don't know how to pull that into like, has that ever happened to you? Have you ever been caught in your own parachute line? But I just remember thinking like, what a great story because of the tension. Like, it wasn't just la, 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 la. It's like, oh my gosh, something like there's stakes. It raises stakes.
Well, drama makes a story interesting.
Yeah.
So, but when you tell a story about like the type of story we're describing, the tension is usually the desire to want to do something great and the tension of like not knowing how.
Yeah.
And feeling like you're ill-equipped and unable to do it.
Yeah. There's another story I tell a lot. When I'm talking about like how to raise capital from people, I'll say like, I found this triplex and I really wanted to buy it, but I didn't have any money. And so I was like, internally I was faced with this, like, I know it's a good deal. I know what I want. I know it's going to give me my future I want. I do not have money. Like, who am I to buy this property? I can't do it. And I could have listened to that guy and just backed down. Instead, I just asked a buddy, asked him if he knew anybody who would ever want to, invest in a deal. And he was like, well, maybe I do. And so he ended up funding the deal. And now I've raised X millions of dollars, right? 400 trillion. And so, but I like, again, it's like I was faced with this, like, do I listen to that inner, moron who's like, yeah, who are you to raise money? Like, you're not good at this. Like, you can't do this.
So with that story, I know you kind of went over it fast, but I would slow it down.
Please, yeah.
And talk about a moment. You always got to find a moment to start in. And so it could be that you were sitting at a coffee shop having a black coffee. It was cold, but I was feeling this tension of I was cold because I wasn't drinking it. I was so lost in my own thoughts and then it's like just start in a moment where people can enter it. That's a nice kind of way to kind of.
Dude, that's so good.
Yeah,
that's so good.
Yeah.
All right. I want to shift a little bit here and pull out of the speaking things just for a minute.
Yeah, sure.
I want to talk about your personal life a little bit. Where'd you meet your wife? Tell us about it.
Youth group.
Okay.
So my wife,
going way back. And where was that at? I'm assuming, was that America or was that before you moved here?
This was in Australia. Okay. Yeah, before we moved to America. So my wife was the youth leader of my sister.
Okay.
In her group, and I was the youth leader of my wife's brother.
Okay. Yeah.
And so we had to chat and see how each sibling is going and stuff like that, and organize conversations. So yeah, met her there. And I mean, she's just phenomenal. I definitely think that, the person you marry has such a big impact on the direction of your life. And it's so funny. I feel like she has brought so much drive out of me. And I think it was always in there, but it's like she helped me remove all of or a lot of the misbeliefs. In fact, she would even say to me when I would say, oh my gosh, I'm such an idiot. She would say, like, no, you're not. You're actually, can you stop saying that, because you are not an idiot. And I remember she really held me accountable with those sort of things, especially in the early days. Now she has to calm me down. Right? I'm like, gosh,
I'm awesome.
Gosh, I'm good. I can impress myself very easily these days. So, awesome. We were married for 18 years and done many journeys with each other in terms of life and transition and all sorts of stuff. In fact, she has a bigger following than me online, even though my business is the revenue maker. She's got like hundreds of thousands of followers online.
Yeah, what does she do? What does she teach there? I know we talked about this before.
She runs a platform called Resilient Little Hearts, and it teaches emotional health to kids.
Yeah.
And so she's a published author. She's a rock star herself. So it's cool being married to someone like that.
Yeah, tell me some things you love about your wife.
I would say for me, it is she's so thoughtful, and I feel like I'm not as thoughtful. So, like she's always planning ahead of like, okay, what's going to happen in this situation, and how do I need to plan and prepare and get things ready so that it's actually smooth for the kids, for us, for life, where I'm so in the moment. I live in the moment, and so we'll have a conversation, create a plan, and then I'm off walking the other direction. So I feel like it's like the yin and the yang always helps us work together. So she's always keeping us on track. I'm running all over the place. And I think one of the biggest things is she's always honored me in my journey. And so always created space for me in my own personal development journey. And so I would say like her respect for allowing me to step into my own space and become the person that I am today, because I wasn't that person when she married me, and so that's been the coolest part of it. So yeah.
How have you guys grown together? Because like you said, when you get together at a young age, you are different people. I mean, how old are you today?
42.
So you're 42. You got together at before 20, right?
Yeah,
way back there. So
I was like 24 or something. Like
that. Yeah. So you're young 20s. So you're completely different people. And I get asked this question a lot because I got married young, and people are like, well, how do you know that you're gonna still like them 20 years later? So how did you guys grow together versus growing apart?
So one thing I'd recommend is couples counseling or some sort of therapy. We've had many times where I'm a big advocate for qualified therapists to help you with marriage and things like that. So we've had many times where we've transitioned through that. One of the ways that I feel like we've grown together is, as much as we can where it works, we always try to do the same programs together. I actually remember I was going through a really big personal development program, and I actually pulled out because I was changing so much from it, and she was going through some health challenges and just wasn't in a place that she could do it. So I pulled out because I felt myself moving a completely different direction. And so I know that we met in a mastermind together, and my wife and I are in it. So, if it works, as much as you can, I would recommend for people to, if they're doing development programs, to really go, is this something we could do together? Or we could attend maybe the core events together or things like that. Because I would say that as people, we just grow and change so much, and doing it together is a big one. I would say having those uncomfortable conversations is one of the biggest ones as well. I would say I learnt that from my wife, Sarah. She's definitely good at going, okay, what's really going on? Like I'm over here in Maui, and I'll have some random thought, and she'll text me and be like, what are you thinking about? Have you how long you been thinking? It's like she just knows what's going on in my mind. So and me opening up has been a big part of that. So I would say having just open, honest conversations continually. But we're definitely different people.
Yeah.
And one thing I've learned is to learn to love the new person that they are. So my wife's been through various challenges in her life, various evolutions in her life. And it's like that curiosity of going, I wonder who she is now, and I wonder who she's becoming. And so leaning into that has been a big thing. Like
that's beautiful,
creating that curiosity of going, I wonder who she is now. Yeah.
Dude, I love that. It reminds me of one of my favorite quotes, Esther Perel, who's like a relationship author. But she once said that in your life, you'll have 7 marriages. Hopefully, they're also the same person.
So true.
Right? It's like, the marriage you have at one age is very different than the other. And the transitions can be tough. So I love that approach of saying, like, I wonder who she's becoming. Like, I wonder who, like, let me fall in love with this person, which is very different. Like when we got kids, like Heather with kids, she didn't really want kids before kids. Like, it wasn't like a thing for her. And she didn't have any cravings to be a mother, but all of a sudden she became a mom, and she became a mom. Like, she loves it. That's her identity. So very cool, man. All right, let's talk about parenting then real quick. You have 2 kids. How old?
Jonah is 11. Georgia is 9.
All right, so there, yeah, you're in it. What are some habits that you do as a family to keep, like, to be a good present father to your kids, but also to maintain your business? I know a lot of people struggle with that kind of work-life balance stuff. What are some habits that you've done and instituted in your life and your family?
I mean, I feel like I've made some pretty drastic changes over the years. For example, I was a professional speaker on the speaking circuit, flying 15 days a month.
Mm.
And when we had Jonah at the age of 2, my wife and I decided that I was going to stop speaking. When I say stop speaking, stop traveling to speak. And that was when I started to explore like online courses, online delivery, webinars were just kind of starting to come out and be a big thing. So that some of us have to sometimes make some big drastic changes in our business model. So that was a big shift. From a practical perspective, a few things. We just got an electric bike a little while ago, and my kids, my son says to me, he's like, "This is the best purchase you've ever made for us," because all they want to do is get on the electric bike. I take them out and ride around the neighborhood. We go up to the lookout in Newport, every night, every other night, and so that's been a really cool thing. Consciously spending time. I think at the end of the day, you're pretty tired, and our kids usually play in their rooms for half an hour just before they get ready for bed. And I'm consciously more and more going in and just hanging out in their rooms and just, playing American Doll or playing Lego or things like that. And it's interesting. I always find that when I do that, their behavior or resistances that they had previously just dissolves. Like any resistance, any kind of behavior that's challenging, a lot of it resolves when I just spend more time with them. And so that's been a big one. I always drop them to school in the mornings, and not everyone can do that, but we've built our business so I can drop them to school. Sarah picks them up. And so, there's some practices that we put in place.
Yeah. Awesome, man. Male modeling. Tell me about male modeling, handsome
dude.
devil.
So, when I was like 17, I was sitting at it was called Gloria Jeans, which is like Starbucks here. And this guy came up to me and he was like, "Do you have a six pack?" And I was like, "What?" I'm this young surfer kid. And he was like, "Have you ever thought about modeling?" And then he gives me this card and all my mates were there. And they're like, "Dude, who was that? That was the weirdest thing I've ever experienced in my life." I ended up following it up, and the guy was a legit model scout. And I remember my first job, I ended up landing my first casting. It was for Fila, Fila. Yeah, Fila, Fila, the brand. And I went down with 4 other models, and I was 17 years old, and I played around the snow, like threw snow around and stuff like that. I had no idea what I was doing. Yeah, totally. Oh my gosh.
Just prancing around.
And then at the end, they gave me this envelope with $5,000 cash in it, right?
Wow.
And I remember I was 17 years old and looking at this envelope of cash, and I was working at like the local Vons, for like $6 an hour. And I remember thinking, what on earth is this world? And so, I did some modeling through school and then university. Did some big runway campaigns, all that sort of stuff. But
like, you walked the catwalk?
Oh yeah, I've done all of them. Yeah, like
do you have video
Fashion Week and all that sort of stuff.
Wow, you were.
But I don't have video of it. No, I don't, and I wouldn't share it. It's so funny. I can't believe you brought it up. But
it's so good.
So
man.
that's But then I got to a point. I remember I was about 23 years old. And I was like, if I continue down this, I was looking at the trajectory, and I could make some great money, but it was empty. I was looking at the older guys doing it, and I'm like, you guys are losers, right? Like there was nothing going on in their world, and I just thought I can't be like that. So that was when I got a real job, and then that was when I found out I was really bad at real jobs. And then I thought maybe I should stay with modeling, but anyway.
Wow, I love it. Hey, what are some of the speaking of money, the $5,000? I want to shift a little bit into like your history with money. What lessons have you learned as you've made more and more money over time? What mistakes have you made with money? Where have you been successes? Oh, it's a broad question, but I'm Curious where you take that.
I would say I feel like I grew up with a lot of fear around money.
Okay.
And like this fear of losing it, fear of, all the money kind of going away, living out in the streets. When you do that cascading thing of, oh my gosh, if I lose this client, then this will happen, then I'll end up on the streets and I'll have no money. And I feel like I had a lot of fear around money. And I would say my journey with business, my journey with my relationship with God as well, and just learning to trust and let go. I would say giving and tithing has actually taught me that. I would say tithing was one of my most difficult decisions for me in my faith. And it wasn't actually my commitment. It was to faith. It was giving, because giving was like, oh, okay, I'm like for real doing this. It's real money. But what was interesting was when I actually let go, it's like opening the palms. I let go, and then it really allowed money to flow through me. And so what I've noticed more and more is that money, it's almost not real. Money just, it is energetic.
Yeah.
And if you understand how to think right and understand how to strategically take action, money just flows. And obviously there's practical things of like learning how to invest well and add value in the marketplace. But it's really fascinating the journey of realizing that you can create so much value and earn so much money in such a short time. It just blows my mind. And so like for me now, in 1 hour, I earn more than I used to earn an entire month of working. in a 1 hour, if I work with a private client, which I rarely do, I only work with a couple of private clients at a time, but I can earn more in 1 hour than I used to do in a month of working 40 hours a week. And it's like just realizing how to create value in the marketplace and what you can actually earn is just incredible.
Yeah.
So, but that journey has been a lot of education, a lot of reading, learning about money, investing, thinking, breaking money patterns, that sort of stuff. So
I love to emphasize a little bit that thought of tithing, like what it seems to do, because I agree 100%. It almost like it changes what money is to you. And when you change what money is from a finite resource that this is mine, scarcity mentality, and all of a sudden it becomes like, oh no, this is energy. It just flows, right? All of a sudden now you're willing to take more risks potentially. You're willing to not hang on so much. So and there's been studies that have backed this up, is when you give money, you generally on average earn more than what you gave. And the more you give, generally the more you give back. That's not always the case, but the principle of like the more you give, the more you receive, like that idea is rooted in science and psychology. There's something in our brain that releases our hold on money. And I think people of faith, like, I mean, not to throw Christians under the bus, but most Christians I know, I might say most, are just like, they care about money more than everyone else. Sometimes it feels like,
true.
They care so much true. Because they're just like, I don't know. And they because I think they think that money is evil in itself. Therefore, we shouldn't focus on it. Therefore, we're going to hoard it because we're afraid of losing it.
Yeah,
it's the exact opposite of what they should be doing with it.
I know. Honestly, whenever I increase my giving, my wealth creation just expands dramatically. And I'm not saying that's you do this and that happens.
Yeah, it's not.
I'm not saying that at all.
But
if I look back over my journey, every single time I've increased my giving, my money making capacity has dramatically increased. Like last year, we gave the most we've ever given away and increased our, the tithe and all that sort of stuff, and we doubled our business. And I'm like, I know it's not directly connected, but it's directly connected. Yeah. And so something happens, even if you just start small, like giving a small amount or whatever. There's something miraculous that happens when you open up your hands and give. So,
and I would argue, and I'm curious your thoughts on this, but I know a lot of people will say things like, I just, I want to give more. So instead of giving my money, I'm going to give my, some time. And I think that's obviously valuable, but give your money too. Like, I'm a big believer. Like, if I know you might not have a lot, you might have $10. It's okay to give $1. Then it's something, right? There's a heart around giving money. And I think people use the idea of like, well, I'm not going to give my money, but I'll give back. I'll teach on my Instagram. There, I'm giving back, right? That's my, that's my service to the world. I'm going to make an Instagram post today. I'm like,
one of my favorite things to do is Jimmy Darts, do you know Jimmy Darts?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, he came and spoke at the mastermind we're involved in. And he always puts up these GoFundMe accounts, and whenever they get up, I'll throw a bunch of money at them, and it's just cool seeing people's stories. And so definitely check out Jimmy Darts. He's cool, and
he like walks around like giving people like just random money in
well,
stores.
He basically
and stuff, right?
he finds people who are willing to give him something.
That's right, yeah.
And you can tell they're in a tough spot, right? And he'll go up and ask for food, and if they go, oh yeah, we got food. Do you want some food? Then he's like, well, I actually don't need the food, and here's another $1,000.
Yeah.
Could we put up a GoFundMe, and then tomorrow they give him $60,000?
Yeah, he's gotten super viral on YouTube.
He's super cool. So yeah.
Very cool, man. All right, well, we got to slowly start moving toward the end here. Where do I want to go before? Oh yeah, I want to make sure we cover this. Charisma. What is charisma? How does one develop it?
Well, for me, charisma is an equation. And what I mean by that is what most people will tend to do is they sit on one or either side of the equation. And so the equation is simply that charisma is finding the right intersection of having a level of credibility and invincibility in your life and having vulnerability and kind of humility in your life. And so what tends to happen is people will lead on one side of the spectrum. So they'll either be very focused on being credible, professional. They don't share much of their personal life. They're, they've achieved all these things. They end up in a lot of ego. We've all met them in different programs that we've been in, and it's almost a bit repulsive.
Yeah.
And then you've got the other side of the spectrum is someone very humble, beautiful individual, very vulnerable, but you're not necessarily going to invest with them.
Yeah. You don't look
great guy, great girl, but not necessarily. You're not going to give them your money or look for their leadership.
Yeah.
And so charisma is learning to continually find the right balance of that credibility and that humility. And even as your listeners think about this, ask yourself, where am I sitting on which side of the spectrum? Am I more hey, I kind of play things down a bit. I'm humble. I don't make a big deal of stuff. Or do you naturally sit on I'm really trying hard to position myself in the marketplace and be, have a real credibility space there. And what tends to happen is that if you can find the right balance of, having someone who I genuinely think you encapsulate this.
Thank you.
You've got a humility, you've got a likability, you've got
$400 trillion.
Exactly. Like you've got a casualness about yourself, which is the humility, kind of personable side of you.
They keep it coming.
But,
I'm really enjoying this part. This is great. Oh, no.
And you've also done 400 billion in real estate, or 400 trillion.
Yeah, you can't, you gotta get it right.
400 trillion. You've done a lot of doors.
Yeah.
And you've been on the biggest podcasts in the world, and you've built a massive brand. And you're also the dude who will grab someone's phone, take a photo with them, and write Brandon Handsome Turner as your name in the phone, which is what you did on your phone. That's what you did for me. You wrote Brandon Handsome Turner, right?
My favorite trick right there.
So the challenge is learning how to balance that. And what tends to happen is people will lean more towards one side or the other, and so that comes back to like the whole idea of the conversion story that we talked about. That formula, conversion story formula, is essentially this idea of you start in the vulnerability, you start in the humility, and you take the journey towards the credibility. But then if you link it with a core statement or a core premise, what I call it, a core premise, then it actually shows them this is the way to go.
Yeah.
And so charisma is the intersection of invincibility and vulnerability.
That's beautiful, man. I really like that, because I think of oftentimes, I mean, not to just pick on Christians, but like we as a believer, you and I, we value humility, right? Like the Bible is very clear, like be humble, don't exalt yourself too much, like, whatever. And so Christians will take that, and just like the money is the root of all evil thought, and they just run really far with that. They're like, oh, I'm worthless. I can't offer anything to the marketplace or to people around me. I'm just going to be humble in the corner and small. And I think of like, I mean, yes, that you were a sinner, you are humble, great. But it doesn't do anybody in this world any good of you living small and you being small. Like imagine if the Apostle Paul or Moses was like, no, I'm like Moses, like, no, I'm not going to go and rescue the Israelites out because I don't want to, take any glory. So I'm just going to hide here out in the wilderness. God's like, no, I literally want you to go do that. He's like, no, sorry, that's not me. I'm just being humble. Like that doesn't serve anybody. You can't rescue anybody when you're just sitting there in smallness. So yeah, I love that concept of there's a balance between like, I am confident, I know this, I can do this, I can lead, but I'm only there because of the humble background that I came from.
Yeah. And I think part of that credibility comes from doing the work. Or a good part of it comes from actually doing the deals, doing the groundwork and getting that evidence in your life that you're actually good at what you do.
Yeah.
And so, because what happens if you push the credibility too high beyond what you've actually achieved, it starts to get into ego and it gets repulsive because, you can say, hey, I've done $400 million, but it doesn't come off as ego because it's real.
Yeah.
But if someone, says, oh, I'm the number one real estate investor in the world and they're not, it's like, you're a douche as well.
Yeah.
Which
kind of goes back to, if we want a full circle back to the beginning of the story, you mentioned how you were making like less than six figures. It's because you were putting out that level of work to the world. That's what the marketplace valued you at because you had not lived the experience, which is why a lot of 20-year-olds aren't making six figures right now. You have to work, you have to get through that. And the good thing is you can choose how much value you bring to the world, by how much you learn, how much you educate, which is why we all join masterminds and we pay for courses and we do all the work. Because we know
education's the key.
It's so
if I look back over the last 15 years, and obviously I'm in the coaching and speaking space, but there was a bunch of people that I started with that all had big dreams.
Yep.
And there's probably one or two left that are at our level and around our space. And all those people who stayed in there, they're all people who stayed educating themselves, stayed investing in themselves, like being in programs, being in like Better Life, being in your 50, being in whatever program it is, right? It's that education and then proximity is I feel like at the start it's education.
Yep.
And then once you've got enough education, it's all about proximity.
Yeah. Can you explain that? Because I agree 100% for those who don't know what that means.
Well, I mean, if you look at the training and development world, any sort of coaching, masterminding, etc., people talk about this idea of a mastermind, but in my mind, I feel like a true mastermind is really about proximity. And it's about people who are highly qualified that can say, hey, that doesn't look like a good deal because of this reasons, and I've done this before, and let's iron sharpen iron. But when you're starting out, I think it should all be about education, which is you need to do some sort of program or some sort of experience where it's like 6 steps, like you mentioned. It's like 6 things you do. It's like a process that you move through. And so at the start, it's education. And I think that once you hit a threshold, and you'll usually know that in our industry, in my expert industry, it's probably around the $300,000 to $400,000 a year mark. Then you can transition into some sort of like mastermind experience. So, but I think that if you get into that proximity too quickly, you don't have the skills to do that well. And so you end up being underqualified for the opportunities a lot of the time. And so, or you don't get access to those opportunities. You can't add value. So you got to learn the skills, the knowledge and the skills, and then the knowledge and the skills give you access to the relationships.
Yeah, I love that. Yeah, I look back at, 15 years ago, like, yes, I got some lucky breaks with the podcast, but, one of the reasons that I became, one of the larger podcasts in the world with bigger pockets. And even though the last year and a half of doing this show, the reason it continues to grow and do well is because of the just nonstop obsession I have with like learning how to get better at it. And so like, I was watching an Alex Hormozi video earlier today for 20 minutes, trying to figure out, oh, there's that one little thing I can do a little bit better. And so yes, there's luck involved, but you can dictate so much of your luck just by being obsessed about education.
Oh, 100%. For me, it's that continual education.
Yeah.
So
beautiful. Well, tell me about your, before we move on to the 3-2-1 pivot section, you have education product. What is that? What does that look like? How do people work with you? What's that like?
Yeah. I mean, I think one of the easiest things that people can get started with, I've talked about this idea of a conversion story. We have a program called conversionstoryformula.com. And essentially it helps people design that one story that they could take to their world and tell it and naturally attract them towards wanting to work with them. And so conversionstoryformula.com, it's the price of a few tacos.
Yeah.
It's kind of like an entry-level experience for people to just experience that. We have a core program which is called Sell from Stage Academy. And that's essentially the foundations and entire step-by-step process of building a high-converting presentation. So that's for people who want to actually build something and move that forward, and that's sellfromstageacademy.com. So they're the two programs that we use, and seen tens of thousands of students through them, and it's cool.
If you could go back and tell yourself, it's kind of related to a question I'll ask later, but I want to do it specifically around your online entrepreneurship business. If you go back and tell Colin earlier, like when you were first starting your online business, what advice would you give him to lessen some pain along the way or to increase your success?
I would say really lean into your strengths. I remember for me, I'm really bad at directions, terrible. And so because I'm really bad at directions, I decided to be a pizza delivery driver early on, right? This was pre-Google Maps.
Yeah.
This was when you had like the paper maps, which, by the way, I feel like that's more dangerous than Google actually having a phone up, right?
A map up.
You're like, hang on, this one connects here. And I remember everyone's delivering probably 7 pizzas an hour to 12 pizzas an hour. I'm delivering 1 to 2 an hour. And my manager pulled me aside, the owner of the pizza place, and he's like, dude, I've got to be honest with you. You're the worst pizza delivery driver we've ever had. And then he put me in the kitchen, and I wasn't any good at that either. But for me, what I realized was I was trying to round out all of my weaknesses. And I would say that the biggest thing is like find out what are you really good at and lean into that. And so for me, for many years, even though I'd gotten really good at speaking, I wasn't teaching it because of lots of fear around it. And then I leant into that space, and then that's when everything exploded. So I would say anyone in the online space to really ask themselves, like, what's the thing you really want to do, and go after that. And it's really scary. When I launched Sell from Stage Academy, it was the scariest program I've ever launched. But that made a huge difference. I would say and as well, I would say this, I mean, for me, obviously I teach speaking. So getting obsessed around one conversion vehicle that you can just work on and refine rather than trying to do 50 different things. And that could just be one webinar, and you just refine that one. You only need one conversion vehicle, and that'll make $1 million. You can scale that to the moon. As soon as you work out that one vehicle that can take you from A to B, and then you go, and that it could be sales calls. Maybe you love doing sales calls. Work out the sales call process, just do that one vehicle, and everything will change. Yeah.
So good, man. All right, let's move on to the 3, 2, 1 pivot. That's the section of the show where I ask you questions about when your life has changed, whether small or drastically. It pivoted one, let's start with 3 books. 3 books that have changed the direction or pivoted your life.
Well, Rich Dad Poor Dad, Kiyosaki. That was the one that started everything. I was in Byron Bay, newly married, and read that, and that was like game changer. I would say Breaking the Habit of Being Yourself, Joe Dispenza. Phenomenal. I would say that book really changed how I viewed thinking, how I bring energy to my world. He's just phenomenal, just another level.
Have you been to his course, like his live stuff?
I haven't done his courses.
I've heard they're amazing, the live stuff. But
I really want to do one.
Yeah.
But I just did the Audible.
Yeah.
So that was a huge one.
Okay, I'll add that to my list for sure.
Yeah, and then a recent one actually by a guy. His name's Joe Pane, Pane, and it's called Courage to Be You.
Okay,
and that's been really cool. So that's kind of more a recent one. I feel like Joe has a really good handle on macro, micro behavior patterns and what they look like. He talks about there's one idea of that some people are just naturally career orientated and some people are naturally relationally orientated. And so relationally orientated people are happy to maybe, they're happy to just stay at home and do stuff at home and just, build relationships. And then there's some people who they're actually just naturally career orientated. And if they're at home, they're going to be completely unhappy. But the relationship person, if they're in a full driven career, they're going to be completely unhappy. And so like knowing which macro profile you are is actually really important, and then having respect for that in your partner and all that sort of stuff. So that was he's just got a lot of macro, micro behavior patterns that for me have like added a lot of insight to my life. So yeah, courage to be you.
Very cool. What do you find yourself? Are you more career or are you more relational?
I'm more career.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Me too.
But what's fascinating is I thought I was more relational when I was growing up, but as I've discovered the purpose on my life, I was just joking that I'm staying at the Marriott just down the road, and I jump into the pool and I'm looking around. We've got the Eternity Edge pool, and just enjoying it. And then 10 minutes in, I'm like, I've got to do something. I've got to start working on my book, or I've got to start writing something. So because I just love it, and I know I wouldn't be happy just at home, just cruising, building friendships. So yeah,
very cool. All right, what about two people that have changed the direction of your life?
Two people that changed the direction of my life. I would say, first person I would say is my dad. He taught me that you can talk to anyone. And I remember sitting in the car, and he was a sales rep and talking to, the CEOs of billion-dollar corporations and working out when they can hang out and go golfing together and stuff. And I remember him turning to me and just saying, they're all human. Like, you can talk to anyone, just so you know, Cole. And he really taught me that, which has just been like transformational. I've mentioned my wife, obviously she's a big one, which I mentioned before. So she's like been the number one transformation for me. And who else? I would say Brennan Bouchard.
Oh, no way.
Yeah, Brennan Bouchard.
That dude. He's one of my favorite authors.
He changed the trajectory of my life. Yeah. And I remember I was in Australia at the time. It was his first seminar, and he jumped on stage. And if you've ever seen him live, he's hilarious because he's quite skinny, right? He's not built like us. Like, he's like skinny, right? And he jumps on. He's all over the place. Like, it's just nuts on stage. And I'd never seen a personal development conference before, and especially in Australia. Australians are very like, just take it easy, buddy. Like, just settle down, buddy.
Simmer down now.
And I looked at my wife and I was like, where have we come to?
Yeah.
But by the end, I'm jumping around, waving my arms. I'm loving it. But he showed me what was possible with online courses and things like that. And that's changed my life forever. Yeah. So that he and I've done many of his programs. So
High Performance Habits he wrote is one of my favorite books of all time. I absolutely love it.
He's so good.
Yeah.
He's so good. So love Brendan.
Cool. Love it. All right. What about one quote that has changed the direction of your life?
I was thinking about this. I feel like Jim Rohn is one of my favorite quoters.
Yeah, he's phenomenal.
Just love him. And he's got this quote where it says, if you don't like how things are, change it. You're not a tree. And just, it's so simple, yeah. But I'm like, you're not a tree. It's such a slap in the face. And I feel like my wife and I have lived like that, and whether it was, we were living in Australia and we asked the question, can we do what we want to do in our career and our life in Australia? And the answer at the time was, I was like, no, we can't. And so we packed everything up and we moved to the US because I was like, that's where we need to be. And I'm like, we're not a tree. Yeah. We can change our life. And so often we get stuck in, all the stories of why things can't change and realize you're not a tree. You can change. So that for me is like, I love that.
Yeah. Let's move on to the past, present, future. We'll start with past. What would you tell your 19-year-old self?
I would tell myself that you've got to, I would say that beliefs are the number one thing you need to be aware of in your life. And how do you know what you believe? Well, just look at what's in your life. So how much money you earn, the relationships you have, where you live, everything is evidence of what you believe about yourself, because a belief is just simply what you believe is possible for your life right now. And that you change your beliefs, you change your life. And so I would say that, which I didn't understand at the time, would be some advice. And the one, lean into your strengths, which I mentioned, that story of the, working as a pizza delivery driver. Lean into your strengths. Like, whatever your weaknesses are, just stuff them. Like, don't worry about them. Go all in on your strengths. That's cool. What I'd say to my younger self.
All right. What does it mean to live a better life today for you?
I would say as I've had career and professional success more and more and heading into my 40s, like working on my health, and continually reminding myself of what I have rather than what I don't have.
Yeah.
And so, for me, journaling about what I'm grateful for. So I'd say for me, and it's really feeling like I'm contributing and helping people. My wife and I kind of joke, or my wife jokes with me that I give too much a lot of the time, especially in my programs and so forth. It's like, you got to have some boundaries in your life. Like there need to be some boundaries. But for me, when it comes down to it, I genuinely I care about people getting results. Yeah. And if they fail, then I'm failing. And so I would say for me, living a great life is continually just helping people. That for me is my goal right now. So
cool.
Yeah.
What about like right now? What are some habits or actions or traits? What are some routines? What are you trying to improve in your life right now?
Like I said, health is probably a big focus for me at the moment.
What are you doing for that?
So custom vitamins has been something, because I never knew what vitamins to take. And so there's a few companies out there that do custom vitamins. And so started with that, which has been great, like blood tests and all that sort of stuff, and then building custom vitamins. Stress reduction. I've started using this thing called Pulsetto, which is, it goes around your neck and it stimulates I think it's called the vagus vein. Everything about Vegas doesn't make me relax, but apparently that's what it's called. And it's like you put it on and it like stimulates the vein. It's the weirdest thing ever. It's called Pulsetto. And I do that like every day, a couple of times a day, and it forces you to just relax, and it reduces your stress. It's really cool. Yeah.
All right, I gotta try that.
So Pulsetto. There's no affiliate link for that. So,
so you know it's real.
Yeah. So you know it's real. And what else? I would say started with just even investing in personal training and things like that. Like I never used to do that. And so I know for me, the capital in a personal brand style business is energy, as opposed to cash. Because you can do a lot without cash in a personal brand business. You don't need much capital. And so any investment into energy and health, I think, is a good investment, especially as if you're building any sort of personal brand in your life.
Beautiful.
Yeah.
Someday when you pass away, hopefully you're 130 years old and your children are standing above your grave just talking about you. What do you want them to say about you? What do you want your legacy to be?
For me, my legacy, I want people to whisper to each other that Colin really lent into what was possible. And he created a space for other people to experience what was possible in their life. And I'm trying my best to live like that. And that is whenever I'm afraid of it, that's the thing I've got to do. And so, that my goal is that they would feel like I genuinely showed them what was possible, and I cared enough to create a space for them to experience that in their life as well.
Awesome. Well, let's wrap things up. What are you excited about? What's coming up in your life, business, career, personal, that's coming up that you're pumped about?
We've got some really big affiliates. Okay. I've got one of the biggest online people in the world promoting our programs.
That's awesome.
So that's going to be cool. And what else have we got coming up? Just building the team, loving building our team. We just had our first in-person retreat. I've been working with them for years, but we just brought them together for the first time.
Isn't that great?
Dude, that was just insane.
Yeah, I took my team for the first, maybe the second time, but to Newport actually.
Yeah.
Wild, like so important.
Oh my gosh, like you just see so much in them that you don't see online. So that's
cool.
That's been really cool. So just building the team more, and just to be frank, for me, it's less about launching completely new things and more about just refining what we've got. So just continuing that evolution and growing what we've got. I feel really comfortable in the space I'm in, and I really like what I do, and feel like I could teach people to speak and sell from a stage for the next 10 years.
Yeah.
So I feel good about it. So it's just refining that and keep working and hanging out with cool dudes like you.
Love it. All right, last question. Where do people find you then? Where do they connect with you?
Instagram is a big spot for me. So just at Colin Boyd. It's with one L, ColinBoyd. And or you can, like I mentioned before, Conversion Story Formula is a good place to just check out and see what we do, conversionstoryformula.com. And yeah, that would be and I got a podcast as well, which I'm about to interview you on.
You are. I'm about to go. So everyone go listen to the episode.
Expert Edge Podcast.
Expert Edge Podcast. Best episode of all time with Brandon Turner.
It's going to be all time. It's going to be the number one.
Number one. 400 trillion downloads, man.
I'm going to hold you to that. So good, dude.
Awesome. Appreciate you, man. Thanks.
Thanks.
And that, my people, is the show. Thank you for tuning in. And hey, before you go, if you enjoyed the episode or if you enjoy the show in general, please consider leaving us a rating and review wherever you listen to podcasts. We really do value your feedback, and we read the comments. We make future decisions about topics and guests and everything else. Plus, it helps us reach more people the more reviews we get. And last but not least, please head over to social media. Consider friending and following and subscribing to all that stuff at Better Life and my personal page at Beardy Brandon, Instagram, YouTube, and everywhere else. Thank you again for listening. I'm honored that you would bring me along on your journey toward building wealth through real estate investing without losing your soul.